Casual enjoyers of Dark Souls know it as one of the hardest games ever released. But hardcore fans know the truth. Every now and then, it isn't one of the hardest games ever released. Dark Souls is responsible for equal parts broken controllers and cured my depression posts on Reddit. The experience of playing the game alternates between serious frustration, even desperation, and exhilaration. Dark Souls rewards those who approach it with the appropriate mindset, patient, accepting, and undeterred in the face of failure. How interesting then that the player's experiences so closely mirror those of the characters in the game. At its core, Dark Souls is a story about the nature of hope and despair and the relationship between the two. Almost every character we encounter is either pushing forward in spite of setbacks or resigning themselves to a dismal fate and encouraging the player to do the same. The first person we encounter shows us this dichotomy, Oscar of Astora, on death's doorstep and aware that he has failed in his quest, yet also optimistic that by passing on his knowledge to you, you will succeed where he could not. The next two people we meet are at the two extremes of despair and hope. The first is the crestfallen warrior at Firelink Shrine, who has nothing nice to say about anyone or anything. He offers advice to the player, but makes it clear he has no expectation that we will succeed. The second is Solaire of Astora, who we find happily staring directly into the sun. He is the one who invites us to participate in jolly cooperation, and laughs heartily after everything he says. They must put something in the water in Astora. We go on to meet other adventurers, expressing either their excitement at life's challenges or their despondence at the lot they have been cast. Now, before we dive too deep into philosophical concepts, let's talk about music a bit. Music serves a unique function in Dark Souls. Whereas other games often have an ongoing soundtrack to let the player know what sort of action is happening at any given time, we only hear music in Dark Souls in very specific places. Yui Tanimura, the director of Dark Souls 3, noted in an interview that, because this game involves paying so much attention to your environment, to your surroundings, not just visually but with sound, we felt that the implementation of music outside of the boss battles would get in the way of the actual strategizing throughout the game. But for the boss battles, the music obviously helps pump up the situation. So we almost exclusively hear music while in a boss fight, and the style, character, and instrumentation of that music closely relates to the boss we're fighting. But that's another video. Aside from boss battles, we get music in our home hub of Firelink Shrine, the Daughter of Chaos Bonfire, and Ash Lake. These scores are generally foreboding and atmospheric, while the boss battles are generally high intensity and assertive. Two scores in particular break this trend though, while embodying the feelings of hope and despair. The first is the music that plays when you enter the Chamber of the Princess following the grueling battle against Ornstein and Smough. You encounter Guinevere, daughter of Lord Gwyn, who gives you the Lord Vessel. She asks the player to take over Gwyn's role by relinking the flame and holding the encroaching darkness at bay. After the intensity of the battle and the deafening silence which follows, this is what we hear as we step into Guinevere's chamber. Everything about this scene is comforting. The warm sunlight gleaming in through the windows, the gently hanging curtains, and of course Guinevere herself. Dressed in flowing robes, reclined easily on a couch, and speaking in a soothing voice to the chosen undead, who has just battled two of the toughest bosses of the whole game. She is massive but kind, and for the first time we find ourselves in a place where we know we don't have to be afraid of enemies or battles or being attacked from behind. The player is given the Lord Vessel, the item needed to seek out the Lord's souls, but more importantly, the player is given comfort and hope. The music opens with choir and organ, evoking a traditional Western worship experience. how fitting that the music should remind us of a church, since we are in the presence of a God, or so we think. We are given a sense of security with this pedal A, which persists under 4 chords, 1, 4, 5, and 1 again. In the video about Tifa's theme from Final Fantasy VII, I explained how familiar this chord progression sounds to us, and it works here the same way, creating a sense of predictability that leads to safety. Above this, the soprano voice sings another familiar tune to anyone acquainted with church music. The opening line exactly imitates the first line of Ave Maria, arranged by Charles Gounod out of Bach's famous C major prelude. This song means Hail Mary and is sung in honor of the mother of Jesus and Christianity. So our scene is established. We are in the presence of divinity and should feel worshipful, but also secure and comfortable. The next phrase takes the grandeur of the first and blows the top off, and bottom figuratively. A wide-ranging harp glissando crescendos into the entrance of the strings. The lowest note of the organ steps down to F sharp at the same time as the violin leaps up to F sharp 4 octaves higher. This is a literal aural representation of the room we're in, as our eyes are drawn upwards to Guinevere's face and the lofty ceiling beyond. The D sharps appearing here signal a move to the dominant key, E major, and a real melody appears as the second section starts. The first section had a slow harmonic rhythm. This means that relative to the beat, the chords changed infrequently, roughly once every 2 measures. Here there is more melodic motion and more rapid chord changes. We get a new harmony every measure, with a descending bass line. Above this, the melody is characterized by 3 ascending notes. We've talked before about the prevalence of rising melodies representing hopefulness and optimism, and here we perceive the same thing. The first section was made up of 2 8-measure phrases, so we could expect the same for the second section. And it would have worked if Motoi Sakuraba had chosen to repeat this phrase again with slight variations. But he didn't, and instead leaps right into a third section which shifts to the parallel minor. This section has more melodic motion and even faster harmonic rhythm. We've moved from 1 chord every 2 measures to 1 chord per measure to 2 chords per measure, really cranking up the momentum. This harmonic rhythm is intensified by a descending 5th sequence and chromaticism. We start with E minor, then move by 5th down to A minor, then repeat the sequence a step lower. The move back to E minor happens by chromatic half steps, moving through C, C sharp, D, then D sharp to resolve back to E. Above all this, the melody also kicks it up a notch. Before, we had a 3-note ascending pattern every measure. This ascent is extended to 4 notes and follows the contour of the harmonic sequence underneath. The chromatic rise increases in intensity, and just when it seems like it can't add any more tension, it opens back up into the first A major section as the track loops. This music, with its familiar chord progressions, inspiring orchestration and vocals, and comforting harmonic sequences, offers respite to the player and a sense of hope. Combined with Guinevere's encouraging words and reassuring demeanor, we get the sense that things won't just be alright, they might actually be good. Perhaps too good to be true. The chosen undead sets out from Guinevere's chamber with the Lord Vessel and a renewed sense of hope and confidence, but not everything reflects this optimism. Several of our friends and companions give in to despair, feeling overwhelmed by their own quest to link the flame. But the chosen undead won't give in. They venture fearlessly through fire and darkness, battling demons, dragons, legendary knights, ancient nightmares, whatever this is, and of course, the most terrifying foe of all. All the while collecting the souls that will allow them to face Gwyn, the Lord of Fire. Gwyn, who discovered the Lord Souls. Gwyn, who led the war against the ancient dragons and vanquished them. Gwyn, the father of the gods of Anor Londo, and the only one with the strength to kindle the flame. Surely, given the encounter with Guinevere and all the following battles, the Chosen Undead is in for a grueling fight, and the player is in for an epic soundtrack. But then the music almost stops us in our tracks. Only Gwyn's leaping slash at us makes us keep moving, but it just feels wrong. This is not the experience we expected. Surely a track more similar to Ornstein and Smough would be more appropriate, with its driving timpani and heroic brass. But Gwyn's music is exactly what it needs to be. It is the music of one who has given up, who is clinging to some sense of purpose, knowing that it won't matter. Music theory is sometimes limited to the question, what do the notes on the page tell us? This only gets you so far, and usually the better question is, how do the notes on the page help me interpret what I hear? This distinction is very important for what we're about to discuss. Look at the opening measures. We're clearly in A minor, with this rising bass ostinato under an unsettled accompaniment to a high and mournful melody. If we take out the rocking accompaniment, there's something very notable here. Every note of the A minor scale is present here except one, C. So what? Well, C serves a very specific purpose in A minor. It's the third. The third of a chord is the most important element of a triad. Without it, we can't identify quality or whether the chord is major or minor. Without it, the chord feels empty or hollow. Wait a second, I hear you saying. You can't just ignore an entire voice to make a claim like that. Well, first of all, how dare you? Second of all, let's put it back in and reevaluate. Yes, it is true that there is a C right there in the first chord, but this is why I made that distinction about notes on the page versus what we hear. We're clearly in a minor mode, there's no question about that, but I don't hear this C as necessarily belonging to the tonic triad. That's because it is surrounded by two non-chord tones, the F and the B. The interval between F and B is a diminished fifth, or tritone, which is striking. For this reason, I actually hear the C as an accented appoggiatura, or upper neighbor, to the B in this fifth relation. Now before you come at me with pitchforks, consider. This rocking motion carries through this entire section. 4 bars later we get a C as well, but the whole pattern has been moved up a step. So now the C is part of the fifth, and D is the accented appoggiatura. Does it still sound like it belongs to the open A arpeggio underneath? What about in measure 15, where it goes up again, this time without a C at all, and again 2 bars later, where we return to the B-F relationship from the first measure? What I'm saying is that even though we see the C on the page, we don't necessarily hear it as the third of the chord due to its context. This is a fascinating phenomenon of our psychology that Sakuraba has exploited. On paper, it's clearly in A minor, but aurally, we perceive it as empty, or again, hollow. This is supported by the lack of a third in the more obvious voices, the melody and bass. When the second section starts, we do get a full triad arpeggiated in the bass, but it's in E minor, the minor dominant. We've spoken several times already about how a minor dominant key evokes a sense of being lost, so think about what this might mean for Gwyn. This section does not last long, and then we get this bridge of cluster chords. This builds to a new theme. This theme is back in A minor and with a third this time, and the melody builds on a section of the opening theme. But even as we have a third, the harmony sinks, emphasized by these extraordinary low notes. What stands out to me, though, are these cluster chords in the middle. A jazzer or pop musician might label this as an A sus add 9, but the key thing about it is that it's missing a third again. In an A sus, the D is only a step away from a full triad, and in an A add 9, the B is. So here we have two notes that want to move to resolve, but they don't. The result is that even with a fully arpeggiated chord in the bass, this sense of hollowness pervades. These cluster chords start to build intensity as the main theme returns. Maybe it's building up to be the final boss soundtrack we expected after all. But then, it just doesn't. It just releases all that tension and winds down. The final 8 bars even lose sense of the meter, shifting between 3/4 and 6/8. We know that Gwyn is no longer the dragon-vanquishing Lord of Cinder we were told about in the story. He, like so many others in Lordran, has gone hollow. His fear of the darkness, represented in music by a theme played solely on the white keys of the piano, was caused by an unwillingness to let humanity, as creatures of darkness, rise up and claim power. This in turn led him to hyperfixate on keeping the flame lit at the cost of his own soul, sanity, and identity. In retrospect, the uplifting music of Gwynevere was an illusion, much like Gwynevere herself. In classic Dark Souls fashion, everything has led to this, another beaten down hollow having failed in their quest and lost everything along the way. Gwyn's theme is not just a reflection of Gwyn himself, but of the pervasive sense of despair across the land. Look again at the left hand of the piano. This pattern repeats over and over and over, just like the cycle of the flame repeats over and over and over. We know in canon that the flame will continuously be rekindled, and we also know that it will eventually always die down, leading to another curse and another land shrouded in despair. Sakuraba captures not just the emptiness of Gwyn's soul in this music, but the futility of the Chosen Undead's quest and overall story. Dark Souls at its core is a story about the relationship of hope and despair, but when we reach the end, it's hard to not feel like despair has prevailed. I hope you enjoyed this video. I love the Dark Souls games, and I believe there is just as much story to uncover in the music as there is in the item descriptions and dialogue. If you want to see more videos like this, please like this one, subscribe for more content, and leave a note in the comments about what music in the Dark Souls series has stood out to you. If you want to help support this channel, please consider checking out the Ko-Fi link in the description. Don't go hollow, and I'll see you next time.